at contact with the Western grip, my palm is facing the sky. Got my Eastern grip knuckle on top. This is my Eastern grip. When I remove the racket and open the palm is facing the target. What's going on, guys? It's Coach Steven with 15 Points of Tennis. And today we're going to talk about a widely requested topic, the topic of grips. Now here's where I get in trouble because I'm not like super scientific about it. Here's where the knuckle goes along this bevel, yada yada. You can go online and there's a bunch of illustrations to show you how to hold the racket. That's not what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about how grips impact your swing mechanics, and then how to maximize your swing mechanics, right, for your specific grip to get the best result. Again, we're worried about what's coming off your racket. That's going to give you your best result. All right, so a little backstory. When I started tennis, when I first started years ago, I actually started with a semi-Western grip. I was right here in the middle. Then what happened was, I didn't have a whole lot of skills growing up. I adopted a style where I was playing defense and lobbing the ball high and deep with topspin. So naturally, subconsciously, I didn't even know, I switched over more and more and more. 2 years later, I was in a full Western grip like this. We'll show you pictures of it. And there's nothing wrong with Western grips, guys, but I didn't understand the swing mechanics behind it. And so instead of using the full capabilities of a Western grip, I was extremely limited. I got really frustrated. I was young and naive at the time. I was so frustrated that I not only switched back to semi-Western, I switched all the way over to an Eastern grip. And guys, this transition was so ugly. It hurt my game. It hurt my playing career. The one good thing that came out of this transition, though, from Western and then back to Eastern, was from a teaching standpoint, I understand the pros and cons of these grips. I know how to teach these grips, all the difference in the swing mechanics, and that's what we're going to discover in this video today. We're going to explore that. All right, so this video is going to be very instructive, but just FYI, it's going to be a little bit longer video, a little bit dense, a little technical. We're going to get really technical here. If you need to break this up, watch the first half, come back later, totally fine. I just want to let you know what to expect. All right, so without further ado, I guys appreciate you for supporting the channel this far. Please hit that like, subscribe button, lower right hand corner, that bell, so you're notified the next video that comes out. Without further ado, let's rock into the video. All right, so before we actually get into the juicy stuff, we have to have there's some basic assumptions that need to be made here, all right? So when we talk about grips in general, we're talking about it's a spectrum, guys, from Western to Eastern, okay? Western being, as you can see my racket here, are basically when the strings, I'm holding the racket in a way, the strings are facing the ground, right? Very closed off to the ball. See here? When I go to semi-Western, the strings are less closed. When I go to Eastern, the strings are very flushed and very open. So obviously when I hit it, I'm going to overgeneralize here for a sec, okay? But generally when you hit the more Eastern, and if you want to go more extreme, continental side of the spectrum, you're going to be swinging more level. You're going to be hitting through the ball more. You're going to be meeting the ball more flush and more square. It's going to produce a flatter ball, generally speaking. And generally speaking, if I use a Western grip with the strings turned down, obviously I have to get the ball up and over the net somehow, right? If I'm going to play tennis. So I have to turn the strings, again, more vertically. I have to get under the ball. I have to brush up more. My swing is going to be a little bit more vertical. Generally, I'm overgeneralizing. You're going to see the more Western grips hit a little bit more topspin, so to speak. All right. Now, I want to, although I'm not super scientific, guys, I want to show you, because I'm going to reference different grips. I want to show you at least what I mean when I talk about these different grips. So come up close so you can look at my hand. All right. And this is how I do it. Okay. With the strings closed, I look at where this knuckle aligns with the different bevels on the racket. That's how at least I determine the grips, okay, guys, on this spectrum. So when this front knuckle aligns directly with this flat part of the bevel, for me, this is the all the way to the far right side of the spectrum. This, for me, this is a full Western grip here, a full Western grip. Okay, I'm hitting the ball like this. All right, strings are very closed. This bevel in the middle, see this top bevel and this flat bevel right here? This bevel in the middle, I call this, for me, this is a semi-Western. Okay, and I'm going to shift it one more bevel over right here. Here we have the right side of this top flat bevel, I have Eastern where this knuckle is. And obviously we want to go one more over, that's continental. And technically you can go backhand grip. Okay, you can hit a lot of spin serves with backhand grip. It's good for some heavy spin serves, but we'll get into that later. Now remember guys, grips they're not absolutes. Yes, we label them, but it's on a spectrum. So there's grips all in between. And so, look, if my knuckle, see this flat bevel on the top and this diagonal bevel on the side, if these bevels meet this edge, if I put my knuckle here, at least I call this a semi-Eastern grip. And this edge right here where semi-Western and Western meet, I'll call that a semi-Western Western. All right, so there's really all these grips in the middle, and there's one more thing that us coaches like to call fake grips. All right, because sometimes, technically speaking, right, according to the chart or whatever, the knuckle is in the right place for, let's say, a semi-Western, but people can hold their racket all these different ways. There's even someone who would hit their serve and as they're serving, change their grip. So I've seen all kinds of stuff. Again, you have to really look a little bit more closely because the mechanics might not reflect exactly where the knuckle position is. With that being said, all right, let's crack into the main part of the video. All right, so we got the basics out of the way. We talked about the general differences, and they produce obviously different types of balls, generally speaking. All right, but the swing, as we know, the swing paths look different. These swings look very different from each other. When you think of the Western grips, who do you think about? You think about Rafael Nadal with that full Western grip. We think about Jack Sock. Even Novak Djokovic is on more of the Western side of the spectrum. All right, and these swings, generally speaking, in terms of the swing path, and we're going to talk about why it's very important you understand this. The swing path is much more circular. It's very much around the body. It looks more like a circle, right? A lot of times we're hitting across the ball, okay, and you're really pulling that racket across your body, more circular. Compared to, when I tell you, think of the Eastern grip swings, think of Roger Federer, Juan Martín del Potro, throw Pete Sampras into that mix. If you want to go more extreme, the continental side, John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors, these swings, less circular, again, relative to the Western grip swing, are a little bit more linear, all right? And it's fundamental for you to understand why that is. And one of the main reasons is because of the pronation. All right, so this isn't okay, here we go. Now come up close so you can see my hand. When I'm hitting a Western grip, all right, right now, again, knuckle on this flat part of the bevel, this is my contact point for a full Western grip. All right, the thing to note here is, all right, I'm going to keep my hand in the same place. I'm going to remove the racket. I'm going to open my palm. When I remove the racket, at contact, at contact with the Western grip, my palm is facing the sky. Compared to an Eastern grip, all right, here we go. Got my Eastern grip knuckle on top. This is my Eastern grip. When I remove the racket and open the palm is facing the target. And that's a huge difference when it comes to exactly how I pronate. So, guys, I don't know if you watched my last video I talked about fixing your aim. Some of these concepts are related and there's some overlap. So I recommend you go back and watch that video if you have not yet already. Okay, it's going to help. But I talked about the 3 wrist positions, okay, briefly. So we have our 3 wrist positions: a cocked wrist, a neutral wrist, and a broken wrist. Again, cocked, neutral, broken, cocked, neutral, broken. So when I go from cocked to neutral right here, and I'm hitting at my contact point, my wrist is strong in the cocked position. Once it breaks like this, once it goes to broken, you can tell once I even put a little pressure on a broken wrist, I have no strength. A lot of bad things are going to happen. Okay, you're going to be in big trouble if you hit and make contact with a broken wrist or break your wrist at any point in time. So, by understanding that you never ever want to break your wrist, all right, how do we pronate? Well, let's talk about the kinetic chain for a sec, because these all relate. These concepts work together. the top part of our kinetic chain, we have shoulder, elbow, wrist. After the shoulder fires here, now our elbow, then our wrist, right? That's how the chain works. And our wrist, bang, it culminates all that energy right at contact, right at one point. It's the tip of the whip. So the elbow and the wrist, these are joints, guys. These joints are controlled by the forearm controls the wrist, the bicep controls the elbow, muscles, joints, all right? So the question is, when I'm culminating the energy right at contact, through contact, how do I get the most utilization out of my forearm? Because that's the muscle that's firing, my forearm. How do I get utilization out of my forearm while keeping the wrist in a strong position without breaking the wrist? All right, so let's say I did, we talked about the different swing planes, right? The linear versus circular swing. What if I did a straight linear swing like this with a Western grip, like a John McEnroe, right? Straight out to the target, and I pointed my strings out like this. Well, what do you see here? What happens to my wrist? When I do a linear swing with a Western grip, it breaks. See how it breaks? Western grip, it breaks. A Western grip can't use a linear swing like this and have the racket swing out. Instead, look at my wrist, guys. If I want to use my forearm, the pronation, instead of breaking like this, but the palm turns from facing up to the sky to down at the ground. Now my wrist is in a neutral, my wrist stays in a neutral position as it goes from sky to ground, sky to ground. And if I do this a bunch of times, you're going to feel your forearm muscle really work here. My forearm is really working. So if I put the racket back in my hand, I go sky to ground, sky to ground. And this is what creates, a lot of coaches like to call it that windshield wiper motion. All right, so instead of with the Western grip extending here and breaking your wrist, once the shoulder extends here and you make contact, through contact, you see the bicep and the forearm pull across. You see it pull across. That way I'm really flexing my forearm and I'm getting that snap in the forearm extension through contact, but I'm not putting myself in a position of weakness. Unlike the linear Pete Sampras or Juan Martín del Potro swing that swing out to the target, again, to prevent him from breaking that wrist, he's got to pull that bicep across his body. Okay, you see his wrist never ever breaks as he finishes his swing. It's always in a position of strength. And that's why, one of the reasons why Rafa is known for the big bicep. And that's why we talked about that pronation. A lot of the Western grip swings look a little bit more circular, right? When it comes to the Eastern grip, what do we know, okay? Based on what we just talked about with the wrist pronation, keeping the wrist strong and using the forearm, right here I can extend a little bit more without having to break my wrist. So see this shoulder? I can get a little bit more shoulder extension right before contact, before I have to turn over and fire these last two muscles, the bicep and the wrist. Okay, and that's why, at least again, the swings relative to each other. Western grip swings relative to Eastern grip, continental grip swings. The continental Eastern grip swings, you see a little bit more extension here, which creates that effect of it being a little bit more linear through contact, okay, before these last two muscles fire through contact and bring that racket through. So why is this important? Okay, obviously, look, if you use a continental Eastern grip, you're not getting any extension, you're firing that thing like a Western grip, where it's more bicep, forearm dominant, that's trouble. Same thing, if you have a Western grip and you're having a more linear swing and you're breaking your wrist, that's also trouble, right? And know the muscle utilization, guys. Eastern grip swing, what do we know? A little bit more shoulder. Western grip swing, you get a little bit more bicep, forearm dominant. So it changes, you're still using shoulder, elbow, wrists on every single swing, but it changes the allocation slightly of the muscles, depending on the grip. Now don't try this one at home. The only reason why this student can do it because he used different grips, experimenting, so he really knows his contact point. But on the left we have a semi-Western grip. So more on the Western side, on the right side we have a more on the Eastern side of the spectrum, semi-Eastern. So comparatively between the two swings, the more Western grips, more of a windshield wiper, a little bit more compact, again, just like we talked about earlier. In terms of the mechanics for the Eastern grip, more classical. You see that out to the target finish is slightly more, a little bit more up and over the shoulder, that sort of thing. Now, in this, I want you to notice the elbow position at contact and through contact. So the left side, look where that elbow is compared to the right. It's a little bit more space with the semi-eastern grip. Now to clarify before we wrap, you can still hit fairly flat with Western. You can still hit quite a bit of spin with Eastern, but that's for another video. My suggestion, unless you're really well versed with your contact point, don't tinker too much. Every time you tinker, it changes your swing mechanics slightly. Thank you guys for watching. This really sets the stage for the next video, chapter 2, which is, in my opinion, the most important. And really we drill down into talking about the specific shots for your specific grip to make you truly effective. Now, the reason why this is really personally resonates with me, this topic of grips, is because, okay, first of all, I don't endorse any of the forehands beyond this point. Okay, there's a lot going on here, a lot wrong here. But when I was young, competing many years ago, as you can see, these forehands, these high loopy forehands with a Western grip, I had a swing that fit my grip. The swing we talked about here. And then I became very obsessed later as I moved into 16s and got older, 18s. I became obsessed with trying to hit flat and drive the ball. And again, you can drive the ball flat with a Western grip, no problem if you understand what you're doing. But look at the swings here. This swing does not fit this grip, and I had so many issues. It was so painful, and look, if I had this video, these 15 minutes would save me a lot of heartache and headache and all kinds of ache and losing. Alright, this was a rough period for me. Look at this swing. That's not a Western grip swing. This is a Western grip swing, okay? And so that's why in that next video, we're going to add that next layer to really drill this concept home for you guys. You're going to love it. Alright, so I'm going to link that next video in the link below when I come out with it. You can click it here as well. We'll see you on the next video, chapter 2.